drawing for the challenge tool.
Are you doing the tickets? No.
Effie, can you
We're just in the woods.
do the tickets? Hand out tickets? Okay, that's great. Okay, whoever, a captive item. We see all kinds of captive things up here. There's some real interesting captive rings, captive. Well, that's a captive ring, isn't it?
It's a captive sphere that's
Captive.
off-center.
That's cool. So we have a lot of interesting challenge items to take a look at tonight. So yeah, Phil, you can be first, and you can have Sean will school you on the process here. Now there's a place you have to stand, otherwise you'll get whacked if you don't stand on the X or something.
Where's right there?
Where's the X?
Well, they got it covered over. So if he just stands right where he is.
Okay. Don't move around or anything. I mean, you know. Okay.
Well, I have captive hemispheres here, and I cheated somewhat, and I started out with thin pieces of plywood and then glued the hemisphere to it and turned it and, you know, cut it out and then wood burned it. And you can see those. They're kind of fun. This is one that didn't work. I wanted to show that it wasn't always successful, even though I cheated and started off with a thinner piece. So that's it.
Where's it go? Well, there it is. I found a chunk of wood in the garage and started turning it, and then I think I just got bored and said, I'll just make it a captive bowl instead of a captive sphere. So there it is.
Oh, I went kind of traditional, just a goblet with a captive ring. What's neat about this particular goblet is it's made out of Paduke that was part of a shipping pallet. And it's a little redder than I've seen in the past, and it cuts just like regular Paduke. It's got epoxy on the inside, and the outside I'm using the new Watco, and hopefully you'll be able to use it. We'll see.
Where do you find shipping pallets made out of Paduke?
You have to keep an eye out. I've also seen a piece of Purple Heart once that had some sapwood on it, and I turned a box out of it that had an old nail hole in it. You don't find them real often, but when you do, it's good. Two days. It was dry wood.
Okay. I turned a yo-yo in the middle of this and made it look like an Egyptian sundial. I'm terrible at making curves, so that's what it ended up, and I'm sticking to that story.
That one-way thing is $250. 75. Would you
Oh,
buy it for
absolutely.
75?
Yeah.
It's yours.
Oh, wow.
Mine's a captive bowl,
Thank you.
and
Yeah.
this one was made in the workshop using the instructor's tool to cut it free, but I'm working on my own tool, so I'm not so limited.
This is a piece of cherry burl that I got off of Facebook, and I decided, thank you to whoever, I wasn't at last month's meeting, but I heard that the challenge was a captive ring or something captive. So I decided I would try that. This is the first time I've ever done captive stuff, so I don't know. I thought it turned out okay. I didn't blow any of them up, so that's something.
Well, this was a hard thought process to figure out how to do a square and a square. It shouldn't seem like it. But the issue I thought about is, how do you know what the size of the inner block is, and is it a square? Not a rectangle. You want a square when you get through. So I had a spade bit that I made from a 1/2-inch piece of rod and a 1/8-inch piece of steel. That's a 2-inch diameter. It's a 1/2 bit, and it'd be like a router bit. And it works great for making circles. So the first thing was to cut or to drill in the lathe, mount the spade bit, and essentially set the depth of the spheres. And these are hemispheres in here. So that's great. And then I figured out, okay, I'll always be able to figure out how much wood I got between the top and the bottom inner sphere. So you start, and you can find a bunch of tools that'll cut the face of the square, sort of, and for only a little while. And then you get to figure out a tool that will get you to the edges of the sphere, creating potential 4 catches for every face, right? So that's 24 catches. And you're going to hold this in a chuck with, which says it also fixes the size of the square you can use, because you can only get a square in the chuck the size, and I'm looking for a 5 or a 4 for my stronghold, because I want to make a bigger one. Okay, hurrying along here. So, okay, I got my square, and I've got it, and I find out it's captive, but it's not free. Now, you can say that's kind of a funny analogy. This one is surely rattles, right? So it's captive, but it's not free. So this is my non-free captive block. So the next objective was to realize that the size of your inner block is such that it has to rotate inside the square. And so this is where you need a combination tool. You need a scraper, and you need an inside turning tool. And it needs to be essentially shaped like a comma. So what you're going to do is put the sphere cut. This means you use a smaller semi-spherical bit to mark your depth. And you'll always be able to tell what the size of the square is inside by measuring how deep you are from the face to the curve. And that's really key. And that sets you then your ability to set it. So if you're lucky, you've got the right depth, then you can tell when you're turning, because you can make this smaller. You can keep making it smaller until it turns free, and then you're totally done. So once you've freed up the inner sphere, it's all over. So you want to be able to go far enough to free it, and then you can sand inside and do all the fun stuff. But it was really a fun operation. And I will tell you, this one took me a day and a half. I screwed with this. And then this one took maybe 3 or 4 hours. So the key is to make your tool to free the sphere. And I mean the captive. So anyway, you want to do one that makes a sphere and a square that's captive with spheres. That'll be a good one to do. But I had fun. It's walnut.
This is my interpretation of a captive sphere. Back in 2009 in Albuquerque, I saw the demonstration from Pascal Odette, I think is his name, from France, and he demoed this. And the real advantage, I think, of the AAW is they give out these handbooks. So in that handbook, he had pretty detailed directions on how to make this piece. And so it still took me a while. I made one 9 years ago, and when you only make one, you don't really remember how you did it. So it took me a while to figure out, and I think it turned out pretty good. What I'm attempting to do is to make a double sphere. So right now, what that means is you've got a sphere here, and then you'd have a sphere here. So we're going to see if that works. I'll let you know.
Okay, this was my first captive ring baby rattle, and I did these without a tool. So then I got to get a tool for Mother's Day, woohoo! And so then I made a lot of them on here, and this is maple with coconut oil because I read that was the best for babies. They could actually chew on it, and it wouldn't be harmful. Yeah.
So I was in the shop and I saw some throw out pieces, and I couldn't resist because they were layered pieces of wood to use these to practice because I figured I was going to mess up a bunch of times. This one actually, when I cut it out, the outer ring broke apart where it had been glued together. So obviously I made it too thin, or it wasn't glued very well, but it wasn't me, so it didn't matter. So I glued it back on, just in a different format, just because I thought it was cool with all the striping effect of that. And then on this one, I got frustrated. A lot of them I wasn't happy with the way they turned out, and I said, well, I'm going to go down and grab a piece of wood. It was white, but I think this is cherry, so it's a light cherry. When I put it on the lathe, I thought it was maple. And I thought, well, what if the sphere doesn't go all the way through? So instead of having it spherical and caught in the middle, I've got it caught on the edge. And the reason I did that is if you use it for the top of a box, you can't grab onto a sphere that's, always getting smaller, but this way you can actually grab onto the top of it. So there you go.
With 2 graduations and all kinds of stuff going on and everything, I did not have a chance to. I wanted to try one of Jerry's spheres, a Saturn bowl is kind of what I wanted to do. Anyway, I had to crank out more of these. Can you touch them? More of these captive ring baby rattles, and so captive ring. So I got my ticket punched for the challenge for May. All right.
I have a captive sphere in the center, and then I turned a bunch of captive rings and made them uncaptive and took them off. And then the hardest part was drilling a hole and trying to get a straight hole on the top of your ring and then on the bottom of the ring. And then I strung brass through it and used beads in the colors of the chakra, which I don't exactly know what that is, but my wife said, you should do the colors of the chakra. It's basically the rainbow colors. But anyway, I don't know what you'd call it. It's quite captivating though, right?
Yo.
I've been very busy making tops. I felt last year I kind of let Jerry down, so I made this goal of making 100. So there's 100 tops here. So I'll give those to Jerry. Last month I missed the meeting because after dinner I woke up and it was 10 till 7. But I wanted to bring, I'm sure you want me to set this down, don't touch it. This tool handle I made for this bowl gouge, I think it's one of the best handles I ever made. And one thing I did to it, I drilled it out and I filled it full of BBs. And it's just, it's got weight to it. I think it's awesome, but I made it. So anyway, thank you.
Well, I kind of got started into the imitation basket weave turning. I don't know whether to thank Rick or cuss him. It's been one of those year-long journeys. But this I set up. There's an art show coming up just a couple of days, actually. And I won the Best of Show at the Lee Summit Art Show. And so they asked me if I'd enter something. So I kind of put this together and trying to work with colors and stuff a little different. But this actually, both pieces, this spalted piece and this one, were actually two halves of the same piece. When I cut them in half, one side was spalted and one side wasn't, and of course the spalted would have ruined my design and it would have been a crime to destroy it anyway. But it was fun. But again, thank you, Rick. I'm sorry? You made that this afternoon? Well, I finished it this afternoon.
You started it last November.
Browsing the internet, I had to watch a video from Tim Yoder about this emerging vase, and then you really burn this one. And I made it so it really would take flowers, and everything else like that. It's kind of neat. It's kind of simple, and all that. I never took a propane torch to something before, and I think I did a little bit too much, but who knows?
Linda and I have a friend whose son's graduating from Harvard, getting his doctorate degree in microbiology, and his topic was studying cholera and trying to come up with a new vaccine for cholera. So Linda had this great idea. First she asked, can you turn a hollow sphere? And I said, well, I think so. And so I turned one out of what I thought was dried walnut. The next day it warped and the lid wouldn't fit. So then I found a dried piece of elm, and I was just about to cut that baby off, and I got a catch and it hit the floor, so I brought it today with my Damn It doll, but it's pretty well racked up. But the third attempt, it wouldn't matter if it hit the floor. The third attempt, which I didn't put out because I figured my luck it would fall off the table, turned out another piece of, a drier piece of walnut. That's my sphere, and if I was Anthony, it would come apart easier if it was threaded, but it's not. And what you have to do is squeeze in the center. And after you squeeze a little bit, yeah, it comes apart. And on the inside, I don't know if you can see them. Let me put them out. If you look up cholera bacteria on the internet, it looks just like those little critters. And so we call this contained. It's in there. And this is going to be his gift for his graduation. We're going to deliver it this evening, and his mother's going to take it to him for his Harvard graduation. So that's pretty cool. Okay, I believe it. It's called What He Said, yes. Spirochetes, okay. Cool, but this thing works great.
So where's this X? Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, this was a piece of Osage orange from our yard. I dyed the inside red. It's finished with epoxy and then 2-component polyurethane, like you'd clear coat a car with. So. Two-component. Like you'd use to clear coat a car. Okay. Same stuff.
You always take pictures at a bad time, Sean. I've noticed. This is a piece of spalted maple that just had some really nice, spalted sycamore, I'm sorry, had some really nice figure to it, and made a nice piece. And then I actually mislabeled this. I labeled it as elm burl, but it's actually black locust burl. And Rick had come up one day, and we dropped this huge standing dead black locust tree that been standing dead long enough, the bark had all fallen off of it. And we dropped it, and we tried cutting some pieces out of it, and it had ring shake going through all of it that we found for the most part, but it had one nice big burl at a crotch that was about that big, so I did manage to salvage another piece a little bigger than this, so it wasn't a total loss.
Don didn't tell you that tree was also sweet smelling, right, Don? Oh. Okay, here I am. Okay, so this past month I've been doing a lot of natural edge, and what's interesting is this natural edge isn't the big brother to those other two, but it looks like it could be. This one's actually the smaller one of the next two that I'm working on, but Chris turned those, I guess, Saturday, so, right? Couple Saturdays. Anyway, my favorite, though, for a natural edge is walnut, or black walnut, because I just love the bark. I think the bark, the goal on any natural edge is to try and turn it and leave all the bark on, and I just think that black walnut has the most interesting bark on a tree. But what I like to try to do is I like to try to continue the curve down through there and carve the feet. Sometimes I get tired of carving those, so I kind of experimented here with this piece, and I'm giving it my own kind of little twist there. So I've got a little bead. I like to turn beads. This happens to be I think that's a 7/16 inch bead. By the way, this piece is called Derriere. Any resemblance? That's it. Over and out.
Well, this is the base of a tree 1 inch up from the ground. And this comes to me by Mrs. Hilton in Olathe, who contributed to anybody who responded to the email. And I came back with 4 pieces of walnut and 1 hackberry. But this was the bottom, and I was hoping to do the bottom, but it got just 2 inches too big to put on my lathe. And I didn't want to risk issues of, hitting an edge. So basically, the goal was to turn it thin, but I also left a stand in the center, and this was what it was chucked on to turn it. And of course, it started out just a little under an inch. So it had to be turned before it started moving. And then what I did, hoping it would still be in one piece, was to put it in double grocery bags and then put some newspaper in there in addition and put it in the basement next to a dehumidifier, which is 3 or 4 feet away, and this took about 4 or 5 weeks before I brought it out. And then I put it on the dining room table, and it would be up a while and it would be down a while. And so I just said, okay, let the sunshine work on it. And so that's what happened, and it nicely balanced, and I got the edges. And so, if I could do it half that thin, I'd like to try it. But anyway, then I wet sanded it with, it's finished with natural Watco finish, and wet sanded it, and then I put oil on it and let that dry, and then about 2 weeks later did a second coat and sanded it some more. So it was fun to do, but it did move around a lot.
These do look like the brothers to Rick's, little brothers. The thing I liked, number one, these were both picked up from some free wood that Don Franks had a friend, and he shot an email to the club and went out there with David Alexander and got a couple nice pieces of the crotch area so that I could try to get the feather. Both of these were, I don't have any patience, so I didn't allow them to dry at all. I just started sanding about when I got home and finished by the end of the weekend and put a finish on them, and got lucky. They didn't crack or anything, and they kept up shape pretty good, so I was real happy with them. What kind of finish? I just, let's see, I put a sanding sealer on them and then took them to the Beal and put carnauba wax, and that's about it. It's, as far as I know, it's silver maple. Yeah. But I don't think Rick's is, but they look like they could be from the same tree. It was odd.
ShowNTell items. Okay. We're early? That's good. Yeah, it must be some mistake. Yeah. You haven't bought this do-rag again. I wanted one, but I got out. Well, you didn't put enough money up there, so I got outbid. It was going back and forth, back and forth.
Howard's getting a Harley next.
Yeah, there's a Harley coming with that, Howard. Okay. All right. Well, I think I heard some thunder outside. Either that, because I know no one's in the room there working. Okay. Anyway, that about wraps it up for this evening. Next meeting is May 11th, or excuse me, June 11th, right here, 7 o'clock. And the challenge is a hollow turning. That is, the mouth has to be smaller than the inside by a fraction of an inch. And that will qualify. But I don't think we're not going to let anybody in with any calipers or anything to measure. But anyway, okay. So that'll wrap it up for this evening. Thanks so much for coming.